In 1959, a famous actor named Richard Burton appeared on the Jack Paar Show and spent 5 minutes mocking Clint Eastwood's performance in a TV Western. He stands there like a wooden post, Burton said to massive applause. No emotion, no technique, just a tall man squinting at the camera. That's not acting, that's furniture. The audience laughed. Jack Paar laughed. America watching at home laughed. 15 years later, in 1974, Richard Burton's career was collapsing. He needed work. He heard Clint was directing a new film. He called Clint's office and asked for a role. Clint's response was 2 words. Those 2 words ended the conversation and became Hollywood legend. Richard Burton was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood in 1959. Welsh actor, Shakespearean trained, considered one of the finest actors of his generation. He'd been nominated for an Academy Award. He was married to Elizabeth Taylor. He was Hollywood royalty. Clint Eastwood was nobody in 1959. He was 29 years old, doing small parts on TV westerns. His biggest role was a recurring character on Rawhide, a show that hadn't even premiered yet. He was making maybe $15,000 a year. He drove a beat-up car. He lived in a small apartment. They existed in completely different worlds. The Jack Paar Show was the biggest talk show on television in 1959. Jack Paar hosted it on NBC. 10 million people watched every night. If you were on the Jack Paar Show, America knew who you were. Richard Burton appeared on the show in October 1959 to promote his new film. Jack Paar, always looking for entertainment, asked Burton about the state of American television. "Have you watched any American TV westerns?" Jack asked. "I've seen a few," Burton replied in that distinctive Welsh accent that made everything sound important. "They're quite popular here. What do you think of them?" "Honestly, they're terrible. The acting is atrocious. These aren't actors. They're models in cowboy hats." The audience laughed. Jack Paar, sensing good television, pushed further. "Anyone in particular?" Burton paused, then said, "There's a young man, very tall, appears in various westerns. Clint something. Eastwood? He's the worst of them. He doesn't act. He stands there like a wooden post. No emotion, no technique, no craft. Just a tall man squinting at the camera. That's not acting. That's furniture." The audience roared with laughter. Jack Paar was laughing. The camera cut to audience members doubled over. Burton continued, warming to the topic. "In England, we train actors. Years of technique, voice work, movement, understanding character. This man," he waved his hand dismissively, "he just stands there, squints, says his line with no inflection. It's embarrassing. American television is full of these non-actors pretending they're cowboys. Tell us how you really feel," Jack Paar said, laughing. The interview continued. Burton was charming, funny, eloquent. The Clint Eastwood mockery was just a small part of the show, but it aired to 10 million people. Clint was watching that night. He was in his apartment in Los Angeles. He'd just gotten back from shooting another episode of Rawhide. He turned on the Jack Paar Show because everyone watched the Jack Paar Show. He heard Richard Burton, someone he'd never met, someone who'd never seen him work beyond maybe 2 minutes of TV, call him wooden, emotionless furniture. He heard 10 million Americans laugh at him. Clint didn't respond publicly, didn't defend himself, didn't issue a statement. He just filed it away, remembered that Richard Burton thought he was the worst actor in American television, remembered the laughter, and he kept working. Over the next 15 years, Their careers went in opposite directions. Clint's career exploded. Rawhide made him recognizable. A Fistful of Dollars in 1964 made him a star. The Dollars trilogy made him an international phenomenon. Dirty Harry in 1971 made him one of the biggest movie stars in the world. By 1974, Clint was directing his own films and had become one of Hollywood's most powerful figures. Richard Burton's career, meanwhile, began a slow decline. He was brilliant in the early 1960s, nominated for Academy Awards, doing Shakespeare, commanding huge salaries. But by the late 1960s, the work was getting worse. Bad films, worse performances. His drinking was affecting his reliability. His multiple marriages to Elizabeth Taylor were tabloid spectacles that overshadowed his work. By 1974, Richard Burton was 49 years old and struggling. The offers weren't coming like they used to. The films he was making were bombs. He needed to rebuild his career. He needed a hit. In 1974, Clint was preparing to direct and star in The Eiger Sanction, a thriller about mountain climbing and assassination. It was a sizable production. Warner Brothers, good budget, multiple roles for quality actors. Richard Burton heard about it through his agent, heard Clint was casting, heard there were still roles available. Burton needed the work, needed to be in a hit film, needed to work with someone bankable like Clint. He called his agent. Get me a meeting with Clint Eastwood. His agent was surprised. Clint Eastwood? You sure? Yes, he's directing The Eiger Sanction. There are roles. Get me in. The agent called Clint's production company, Malpaso, left a message. Richard Burton was interested in a role in The Eiger Sanction. Would Clint meet with him? The message reached Clint. He knew immediately who Richard Burton was, also knew exactly what Burton had said about him on the Jack Paar Show 15 years earlier. Word for word, wooden post, furniture, worst of them. Clint told his assistant to return the call. When the agent picked up, Clint's assistant delivered Clint's response. Mr. Eastwood says, not interested. 2 words, not interested. The agent was confused. Can I ask why? Mr. Burton is very interested in working with. Mr. Eastwood's response is, not interested. That's the message. The call ended. Richard Burton heard back from his agent within the hour. Clint's not interested in meeting with you. Did he say why? No, just not interested. That was the entire message. Burton was stunned. He was Richard Burton, Shakespearean actor, Academy Award nominee, one of the most famous actors in the world. And Clint Eastwood, a TV cowboy who'd gotten lucky with some spaghetti westerns, was saying, not interested? Call back, Burton said. Tell them I'm very serious about this. Tell them I'm willing to read for it. Tell them, Richard, his agent interrupted gently. He said, no, that's it. Burton hung up, sat in his house, tried to understand what had just happened. And then he remembered. Slowly, painfully, the Jack Paar Show, 1959, he'd mocked Clint on national television, called him wooden, called him furniture, called him the worst actor on television to 10 million people. 15 years ago, Burton realized Clint had remembered, had never forgotten. And now, 15 years later, when Burton needed work and Clint had the power, Clint's response was the same dismissive tone Burton had used, not interested. Burton tried one more time. He called Clint's office directly, asked to speak with Clint personally. Clint's assistant answered, Mr. Eastwood is not available. Please tell him Richard Burton would like 5 minutes to speak with him. I'll pass along the message. An hour later, the assistant called back. Mr. Eastwood's response, not interested. Same 2 words. Not interested. No explanation. No elaboration. Just the same curt dismissal Burton had given Clint 15 years earlier when he'd reduced his work to furniture on national TV. Richard Burton did not get a role in the Iger sanction. The film was made without him. It was a modest hit. Burton's career continued its decline. He worked sporadically through the late 1970s and early 1980s. Some good roles, more bad ones. His drinking worsened. His health deteriorated. In 1983, 9 years after being turned down by Clint, Burton did an interview with Rolling Stone. The interviewer asked about regrets. Burton paused, then said, I mocked Clint Eastwood once on the Jack Paar Show in 1959, called him wooden, said he was furniture, got a big laugh, thought I was very clever. 15 years later, I needed work, asked him for a role. He said no. 2 words, not interested. That's all, just those 2 words. And I realized Burton stopped, collected himself. I realized I'd been cruel to someone who'd done nothing to me, and when our positions reversed, he remembered. He had every right to say no. I earned that no. Do you regret what you said? The interviewer asked. Deeply, not because he became successful and I needed him, but because it was cruel for no reason. He was a young actor trying to work. I was an established star. I punched down. That's unforgivable. His 2-word response was more gracious than I deserved. Richard Burton died in 1984 at age 58. In his final interviews, he mentioned the Clint Eastwood incident multiple times. It clearly bothered him. The casual cruelty, the long memory, the justified rejection. Clint rarely spoke about it. When asked in a 1990 interview about Burton, Clint said simply, he was talented, made some great films. I didn't know him personally. He mentioned you rejected him for a role in the Iger sanction. He wanted to work on that film. I passed. Because of what he said about you on the Jack Paar Show, Clint was quiet for a moment. Then I remember what people say about me, especially when it's broadcast to 10 million people. When someone calls you furniture on national television, you remember when they ask you for work 15 years later, you're allowed to say no. Was not interested, all you said. That's all I needed to say. Here's what those 2 words in 1974 teach us. Richard Burton was at the top of Hollywood in 1959. He had power, fame, acclaim. He used that power to mock someone beneath him on national television, not for any professional reason, not because Clint had done anything to him, just because it was funny and easy and the audience laughed. Clint was powerless to respond in 1959. He was nobody. Burton was everybody. What could Clint do? Nothing. So he filed it away and kept working. 15 years later, the positions reversed. Clint had the power. Burton needed work. And when Burton came asking, Clint's response was 2 words that communicated everything. I remember. I haven't forgotten. And I owe you nothing. Not interested. Burton spent the last decade of his life regretting those 5 minutes on the Jack Paar Show, not because it cost him a role, though it did, but because it revealed something about his character. He'd punched down. He'd been cruel for entertainment. And when the tables turned, that cruelty was remembered. Clint didn't need to be vindictive, didn't need to mock Burton publicly the way Burton had mocked him, didn't need to explain or justify. Just 2 words. Not interested. That's the elegant response to cruelty. not revenge, not a lecture, just the quiet exercise of power. No. Sometimes the best response to mockery isn't anger, it's success. And when success gives you power over the person who mocked you, the best response is often the shortest one. Not interested. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that words have consequences and that cruelty eventually comes back around. The two-word rejection became a Hollywood cautionary tale told at parties. Remember Burton and Eastwood? Everyone knew. The mockery. 15 years, 2 words, lesson. Be careful who you insult on the way up. 1,995 Film Institute interview. Clint was asked if he held grudges. I don't hold grudges, but I remember. There's a difference. A grudge is wanting revenge. Remembering is just having a good memory. When someone shows you who they are on national television, believe them. So when Burton asked for work in 1974, you weren't being vindictive? Vindictive would have been hiring him and making his experience miserable. I just didn't hire him. That's choice. I had the power to say yes or no. I said no. He'd earned that no 15 years earlier. 2 words, not interested. Nothing more? What else needed saying? He knew why. I knew why. Adding explanation would have been theatrical. I just said no and moved on. Did you consider forgiving him, being the bigger person? Clint's response became as famous as the 2 words. Forgiving someone doesn't mean giving them what they want. I can forgive someone for insulting me and still choose not to work with them. Forgiveness isn't erasing consequences. It's not carrying anger. I wasn't angry at Burton in 1974. I just wasn't interested. 2 different things. That distinction became another lesson. You can forgive and still say no. Burton called Clint furniture in 1959 for laughs. 15 years later, Clint said 2 words, not interested. Burton spent a decade regretting 5 minutes. Clint spent 15 years building something so substantial that 2 words were enough.